Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher to walk you through a 10-game slate tonight. Another big one on a Friday night. Mike, how are you on this fine Friday? See, is that Miami?
Yep,
Your
it's a
sport?
Miami shirt. I broke the curse yesterday, baby. I bet against Miami with injury concerns, and thanks to Jimmy Butler not dunking at the end, my Houston plus 3.5 stood up. So I'm actually wearing Miami apparel today because it feels like impossible. It's like N64. Where you're playing GoldenEye, you got to beat the 205 to get the
Yeah.
Invincible facility. It's just got to come together perfectly, and it happened. So feeling good. I'll never resist betting against Miami when they're missing guys. But got lucky, but we'll take it.
Well, cheers to Miami. They kept it to a minimum last night. So, yeah.
I
Homie in chat.
I also had a killer plan, although I pivoted off of Zion.
Yeah,
But
it was great.
that was a great
From a
plan.
DFS perspective, Morant ended up not being that great because he had the same score as like all the other guys below him that were 2K cheaper because they didn't get a fourth quarter. He was awesome. I mean, nothing to take away from him, but Hero, Butler, Clarkson all basically were the same for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah,
Holman in chat
just
noting
incredible.
Jalen Duren made him a bunch of money the other night. So shout out to you. We've got a lot of stuff to talk through on a 10-game slate. Plenty of injury stuff. We'll see how long my my throat and voice hold up, but we'll do our best. Let's start with the Golden State Warriors, who are going to be without Steph Curry for a while. It seems like they just listed Draymond Green out, and they've listed Klay Thompson as questionable here. And I don't know if we've entered a different timeline for Warriors fans than the two timelines that they were trying to mix together. But things are looking shakier for them. What are your expectations on how things look tonight in the absence of Steph Curry and Draymond Green?
Yeah, the timelines are like kind of coming together. It's like Back to the Future 2, right? Where they're like kind of figuring out where they're at with time. Let's start with the Steph stuff. The easy part of this analysis, as our Slack is just going completely bonkers right now, is Poole, right? Jordan Poole is going to be resuming the point guard role. We saw him in his last 12 games without Steph go just completely off. Shot the ball well, additional ball handling, more pick and roll. He went 25 and 6 per game in 35 minutes. Matchup's a little bit tougher today. He's going to see a lot of D'Anthony Melton, but expect a huge role here with Jordan Poole. He should get all he can handle. They've got, and they're going to have to, figure out their defensive role stuff, which we can figure out in a second. But yeah, I expect Poole to pick up a huge role here. Maybe see some Tyler Jerome behind him, but expecting him to probably get pretty hot here is kind of the headline without Steph.
Yeah, tough matchup to do so against Philadelphia, and we'll see the prices on a lot of the Golden State guys were raised last game in anticipation of a potential mass rest situation. We might have it on our hands tonight, although not rest induced, actually injury induced on this one. On the other side of the ball for Philadelphia,
let's cover the Dre stuff too. There's a lot to cover there. I just wanted to cover stuff really quick. So I thought at first with Klay getting the midday Q tag, which is obviously a very ominous sign. And even regardless, I think Dante DiVincenzo is going to start. He probably gets the unenviable job of picking up the James Harden assignment. They're missing a lot of ball pressure, and we saw DiVincenzo pick up that role last game without Klay. Klay's not really a guy who guards on ball a lot anyways. He guards wings, and he guards guys to chase around. So I would expect DiVincenzo to start regardless. And then if Klay's out, I think it's I think Klay or Dre. I think either way, we're probably getting Jonathan Kuminga in the starting lineup. We saw Jonathan Kuminga start in the second half over Kevon Looney for, quote, spacing reasons. That won't be the case here because he obviously can't really take Looney up the court by choice against Joel Embiid. So I feel pretty confident Kuminga is going to start at the 4 regardless. And then if they're missing Klay, maybe they go to Moses Moody. There was a comment from Steve Kerr saying that he's expecting them to play more, which this is before the Klay thing. So I think they were planning to play Moody regardless following the Steph injury. And then now without likely Klay, I think he's going to miss. And then without Draymond, I would expect Moody to pick up minutes. So as you kind of alluded to at the top there, their young timeline guys are suddenly thrust into this huge spot today against a defense that's been playing pretty well, top 5 over the last month in the Sixers defense.
And then with Looney, without Dre, with the matchup against Embiid, Looney and JaMychal Green will primarily fill the center minutes. Do you expect the two of them to fill a full 48? Because the options of who they would play in like smaller ball lineups, right, are probably only accessible against the second unit of Philadelphia.
Yep.
And the options for what they could do with that, is really Kuminga. But if Kuminga is starting already, it would be harder to kind of do that. So is this a spot where you think like Looney and JaMychal Green are going to play closer to a full 48 than we've seen all season?
Yeah, look at our minutes after this. I'd probably wouldn't go full. They like Anthony Lamb and Kuminga as a front court duo sometimes, so I think that probably get mixed in a little bit. But it would be. I'd probably put it in the mid 40s. It should be most of those minutes, obviously, because of the matchup.
Okay. Let's move on.
Do you see where we have it at? I mean,
I don't have it in front of me, so we have a lot to go. We have a lot of work to go through after this, and that'll be one of the spots we look at again. Cool. Let's go to the other side of that, where DeAnthony Melton is expected back. Daniel House likely back. For freaking Korkmaz questionable here, but relative health for Philadelphia as good as they've been in a long time, really. Tyrese Maxey's still a few weeks away, it sounds like. How does how do things shake out in the starting lineup here and the rotation with Melton and House likely expected back?
Was that a pun intended on how things shake out there, or someone? But
perhaps.
So yeah. Interesting notes from Doc Rivers after the game. He said they were expecting DeAnthony Melton to play all day, and then last minute they didn't have him. How many times do we hear Doc Rivers saying he has no idea if guys are going to play, which is hilarious, or he's just wrong? So Melton off the injury report, he'll be back full minutes. Expect him to play a pretty good bit. Again, he'll be picking up the Jordan Poole assignment. I think he's pretty healthy, so would expect him to play a ton. Obviously, that's going to move Matisse Thybulle to the bench. Won't really be affecting James Harden and Embiid. Obviously, those two have a fantastic two-man game going, and Harden's running so hot on potential assists. Last two games, 15.5 assists on 18 potential assists. So he's just completely cooking there. Really, a lot of talk of the two-man game going between Embiid, as my star select's going ham, Embiid and Harden two-man game. We see that usage be pretty solid, and Tobias being kind of filling in the gaps offensively. So I would expect those two to have a pretty good spot. I think Harden's in a really good matchup. It's a better matchup for Harden, but Embiid's just matchup proof. So I think either one are in a big spot. And then after that, you probably can't go anywhere else.
All right, other questionables on the slate. Marcus Smart questionable for the Celtics, along with Al Horford and Time Lord Robert Williams, although there was clarification that Horford is expected back. Is that the case for Time Lord as well? Will we see his season debut tonight?
Yeah, should. We've got multiple reports from the big dogs, Woj, et cetera, that Time Lord's back. There was an outside shot he could have played Wednesday, but it seemed pretty unlikely. Curious to see what kind of hardware he has on his knee, because we see some practices where he has just this massive brace on his leg. He's been going through 5-on-5 for over a little bit of time here, so I would expect him to have a minutes cap for sure. You would expect it to be a pretty hard one, considering all the knee injuries and how this guy's struggled to stay healthy. And then the quote going back with Brad Stevens, when he was the coach, saying, this was early last year when he was front office, saying, we weren't ready to play him NBA minutes. His body wasn't ready for it yet. And then we saw him play NBA minutes and had a breakout season. So I would expect to be a pretty long ramp up here, given the nature of the injury and his history. But expect him to start. That starting lineup was world beating, best lineup in the NBA last year among X amount of lineups with minutes. So if Smart can go, we'll see. Midday Q tag on an illness, definitely, something that's been pretty bad. We talked about this, that Jabari actually did play yesterday, but it's generally been an ominous sign that guys are missing. If he's out, certainly expecting Derek White to start in his place in a matchup that's, pretty good to attack against guards here. Great matchup with Jason Tatum. He's rolling. He put it on Paolo Banchero the last time these guys faced off. He scored 40 points. So expecting pretty big roll out of Tatum regardless. And bottom line, Tatum, I love Tatum. We'll see on Smart. The minutes limit for Time Lord. We'll see if Al Horford has a minutes cap. He had the protocols before this personal issue that kept him away from the team. So he'll probably have a cap on him too. So we may see a little bit of Blake Griffin. Obviously not on the table for DFS, but they're getting Time Lord back is awesome. I can't wait to see him play tonight.
Do you think so? Do you think Time Lord slides into the starting lineup, or do you think you do? Okay.
I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't. Yeah, I mean, they want to get him ramped up. He's very much kind of a feel player. I think they want to build that chemistry together since they've been apart. If you're going to give him minutes, you might as well give him minutes when he's going to want to learn this chemistry. It's somewhat new wrinkles to their offense with the extra passing and so on. I think it makes sense just to start him with that lineup because it was so good last year.
Yeah, I think the biggest plus for it is that you don't have the warm up and then cool down and then go back in. You have the warm up and like start the game and then come in, cool down. And I would expect the minutes. I'm thinking it's going to be like teens, perhaps low 20s in a best case scenario. And then, that would be the reason that I think you could consider they might start him off the bench is just like they're not going to play him very many minutes on the whole, but their guys are so fluid and their rotations are pretty fluid with how they mix and match guys that I don't think it's a real issue to start them together. And then, they can still bring in Grant Williams for plenty later.
I would even consider just playing him in the first half, something along those lines, just because I think building that chemistry is really important. They're a team that's all about having the right fit and all that stuff. We've seen Blake really step up for them.
Okay, on to Charlotte, where LaMelo Ball's return with the short stints ended up being into the mid-30s in minutes once again. We've seen this with a couple different quotes this year with different coaches with the short stint stuff. He's not on the injury report, but Gordon Hayward is questionable. Expected to return, it sounds like, but with Gordon Hayward, you never know. It's usually a slow healing process. What are your expectations here for Hayward, and how would it impact things? Because you can see like the starting lineup this year has been pretty settled with LaMelo basically replacing McDaniels, but Hayward coming back into the mix. There's somebody who's been starting consistently all year long, potentially off the bench, whether it's him or whether it's Oubre or whether it's PJ Washington, I think are the most likely candidates. What are your thoughts on how introducing Hayward back into the rotation impacts the other guys?
Yeah, all the signs are there that he's going to play. Probably have a little bit of a cap on him. Just he hurts all the time. It is a shoulder thing, so maybe his conditioning is okay. But I would expect him to start. We've seen Kelly Oubre go to the bench. I think that's going to happen again. So starting lineup should be LaMelo, Rozier, who's playing a little bit better. Had a big usage game in the last game against the Pistons. Hayward at the 3, PJ Washington at the 4, and then Mason Plumlee at the 5. Still get a pretty good amount of minutes of Oubre off the bench as a 6-man. We see his minutes are pretty steady, almost touching 30 sometimes. But just want to note LaMelo, and it's kind of funny that the same exact thing happened when he returned from injury on the 12th of November. It was literally the same. Day before listed as out, gets the day of midday Q tag, gets the Steve Clifford short stints quote, and he would have played 30 minutes in his return back in November if it was for garbage time. Gets that role again, overtime puts him 34, and played pretty well. And he ran the hottest of anyone on potential assist. Have you looked at his potential assists from the last game?
I've not. I assume he went 11 for 11 based on what you're saying.
No,
he went
11 of 9. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So he ran real hot, friendly home scoring there. But I expect big minutes. We know we don't really have a feel for how Clifford's going to treat him, right? We saw the Borrego benching frequently. It led to so many YouTube commenters going off on all the Borrego pressers.
Yeah, and kind of on that thought with Clifford, I mean the preeminent news clip or conference clip that has been going around was Clifford really trashing his team for nobody playing defense and nobody being interested in playing defense at all. That is whenever. Obviously, there's volatility mixed in by just introducing Gordon Hayward back in. But when you have a coach that frustrated with the team, there's some variance mixed in as well that there might be a scapegoat for no one playing defense. The guys that I think would be most likely the candidate for that are also the guys who I think are most likely to lose playing time to Gordon Hayward, Kelly Oubre, and PJ Washington, because they've been pretty weak defensively most of the year, despite PJ racking up steals and blocks. So it could be a lot of different things that bring downside for Charlotte tonight. Just a note there.
Yep.
All right, Sacramento, Kevin Huerter, still questionable. He missed last game. It seemed like the reports pregame were that he was going to play, and then it ended up not being the case. We saw Terrence Davis get the start, but sort of not fill Kevin Huerter's role completely. He just basically had a spot start where he came out firing and was really hot, but he ended up only playing like low 20s minutes in that game, mid 20s minutes. Malik Monk really benefited off the bench, had a huge role and they played pretty tight against Toronto, which we see some teams do respond to. What are your thoughts on Kevin Huerter's availability tonight and how it would potentially impact other guys on Sacramento?
I think it's pretty good that he plays. I think the back-to-back was a huge factor there. Guy who's had injury history before, listed with soreness. That's usually an indication that you just need the game off in a back-to-back. So I'd expect him back in the starting lineup with a fairly normal role. But yeah, we saw De'Aaron Fox really come through here with 41 minutes, and he gets one of my favorite matchups to attack against the Pistons and their weak guard pressure right now. So curious to see how he has maybe another strong game after really having a very, very good outing against the Raptors. The Kings offense really showed up, and they've been consistently very good. You mentioned Monk too, but I think Monk's minutes will still be pretty good. Obviously, he won't get the upside if Herter's in there. But yeah, I think the Kings are going to score some points here today.
Yeah, basically from a minutes perspective, what you saw happen last game was Terrence Davis kind of replaced Monk's minutes and Monk kind of replaced Herter's minutes is kind of the way that it ended up working despite Davis kind of starting. And I think that's just that secondary ball handling they really, really value playing next to Fox because Fox breaks down the defense so much at the first level that if you don't have somebody there who can break it down at the second level, then you reset everything. And Huerter and Monk are two players who are pretty good at breaking things down at the second level. As well. So I think that was a big factor in that. All right. Minnesota, man. I said on one of our podcasts last week that I thought this Minnesota season was dead. I'm feeling better and better about that. D'Angelo Russell and Rudy Gobert listed as questionable. They're obviously without Karl-Anthony Towns tonight. The matchups with Oklahoma City. So it's a spot that if you get thin here, there just is going to be a ton of value at play in DFS. So talk us through your expectations for Minnesota tonight.
I think Gobert's got a good chance to play. He spoke after the game, and he said, it's not bad. We'll be all right. I didn't even really see when he got hurt. He said he did sprain it, though. So, yeah, we'll see. I think he's got a pretty good chance to play. I would say he's a little bit more likely than D'Angelo Russell, who said he was, quote, sore after suffering the injury 2 games ago. Got rolled out pretty early in the last one. I think he's got a pretty good chance to play. But if not, and I think it's important to note here, if he doesn't play, the matchup is very, very different. You got this Clippers team, just scrolling down to them. They had really 4 guys who have ability to score on offense and create their own shot. You need another defender in that instance. Against OKC, you've got SGA, and then Giddey and Dort, not really. Jalen Williams is good, but not a guy you're going to plan on defensively. So my point is, I think that if D'Lo's out, I think they go to Jalen Noel here. I think you lean into the offense. You're coming off a disastrous offensive game. Take Rivers out of there. He's not helping you. So I think Noel gets the start. Could be looking at a lot of minutes. So I would, if D'Lo's out. I think D'Lo has a good chance to play though. But yeah, we could talk about OKC in a little bit. But yeah, we'll get a good. I think there's a pretty good chance they're out there though.
You think that there's a good chance that both Russell and Gobert are available tonight?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's just a knee contusion for D'Lo. It didn't sound too concerning. It didn't look that bad, honestly. So I think he's got a decent chance.
Okay. Do you want to stick with the Oklahoma City side of things here with Jeremiah Robinson Earl ruled out? Lindy Waters was called up here. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on how that impacts things for the Thunder?
Yeah, so I think that the matchup's also important to note here. We saw them go with Darius Bazley against the Miami Heat as the starter. Very different here. Obviously, they put Dort on Bam a lot, as they really just they weren't even switching to it. Like they would just pick up half court that way just to mix up defenses and show the Heat different looks. So against Gobert, you're not putting Dort on Gobert. And we've seen Pokusevski, even with the healthy JRE, start at center. He has 1 start at center against the Wolves this year, has another start at power forward next to JRE. That was against Cat, so certainly a different matchup there. But my point is, Daigneault trusts him against Gobert. I should add, I forgot to mention this, if Gobert is out, Naz Reid, probably the best player on the slate. He'd be a really, really good play. I forgot to say that. But yeah, I think this is a better spot for Pokusevski. We saw his minutes just get nuked here. Really tough scene. As Bazley was very good defensively. Miami got 110, but I thought he did well. Daigneault talked him up, but I think they switch it up here. Certainly going to be real dicey, but without JRE and you're playing Pokusevski as a 5-man, you've got to feel way better about Jalen Williams' minutes. Same with Dort and Giddey, obviously, too. So I expect those 4 guys to carry the load. Then we're guessing after that.
Yeah, I mean, you can see in that game against Miami, just by looking at kind of the plus minus column, the starters played really effectively, and the bench is really what kind of gave the game away. And as a result, the minutes got pretty condensed on the starters as well, which projecting minutes for OKC is always really challenging because you know, they'll just rug pull guys left and right. Like Pokusevski will, play 16 minutes to start a game and then play 4 minutes the rest of the game. And so it's really hard to project, but it does show and highlight sort of the ceiling when a unit is playing well. OKC's, this year not pulled the foot off the gas quite as much as they have in the past. Maybe that will come in a few months as they drift further down the standings, but
and should note too, 2 SGA games against the Wolves, and they didn't really shadow, I guess to use an NFL term, Jade McDaniels on SGA. They put a little bit of Ant. I'm curious to see if D'Lo's out. I think that will be less likely. I think you need to conserve Ant's energy. So kind of low key. I think if D'Lo's out, that makes the matchup tougher for SGA. So just something to note there. But SGA is just absolutely rolling right now.
Yeah, in a couple of ways. Not only would they perhaps preserve Ant more, but it would also open up more minutes for Austin Rivers over D'Angelo Russell and Noel, who are really, really poor defenders. So even if Rivers didn't draw the assignment because they wanted to have more offense, there's just more minutes for him to play, just generally in that type of spot. Okay, let's move to the Bulls, where Ayo Dosunmu is questionable once again. What are your thoughts? Any read on Dosunmu?
Yeah, not much. Didn't really have much of a chance to play in the last game. Didn't go through practice before yesterday's game. Maybe he sits. We saw Kobe White play pretty well off the bench. Seeing Alex Caruso have an okay game until late. You get the slip and slide against Brunson late. Big win for the Knicks. So yeah, probably a little unlikely, but he could return. And it's basically just going to be affecting Kobe White, Goran Dragic to a lesser degree. Shouldn't affect Caruso too much. Maybe takes a little bit of ceiling off him. But yeah, big win for the Knicks. And I guess just to hit them since there's no injury stuff. Yeah, Brunson played through that foot thing. We saw him have the walking boot. Talked about that in the last edition with Fan. And he comes out there and smashes. I think he had 22 drives, scores 30, hit some big buckets late in this game. And it was really more of a two-man game with Barrett getting a little bit of foul trouble. And Thibodeau said after the game that, they're leaning more into playing a two-man game with Barrett and Randall. Randall also big usage. Really took it to Patrick Williams, used his size all over the court, not just shooting threes, getting to the line. It was a really big game from Julius Randle. Would kind of expect that to happen again.
Yeah, the one note I'd have on Dosunmu is that did flow up to more potential minutes for Patrick Williams as well. And we've kind of talked about this in the past, where when the Bulls are without one of their guards, yes, it helps the guards, but it also helps Patrick Williams because there's just fewer ways for the Bulls to play that 3 guard lineup that they sometimes will run out there, or basically treat Caruso as like a 4 in terms of guarding situations. So Caruso may be in line for big minutes again. Once again, the rates are really modest and he's cheap, but he's one of those guys that ceiling wise is just always going to be a challenge. Okay. For the Mavs, they're going to be without Maxi Kleber for a number of weeks now. We saw them play last game without Maxi. They've got Davis Bertans questionable tonight. How do you think the Mavs handle things in the absence of Kleber?
Yeah, so I think the starting lineup is going to be the same, but very noteworthy that in the second half, they started Reggie Bullock over Dorian Finney-Smith, which is a stunner. And then not as stunning, they started Christian Wood in the second half. And Jason Kidd said it was because they didn't have Maxi Kleber and they had to rework the rotation. So that leads us to think start time for Christian Wood. I think it makes sense. You certainly need the interior size and scoring as much as you can, even though it's a tough matchup for him. Wouldn't be surprised if he starts here. And losing Kleber, as we don't think of him as an offensive player, but his spacing is really valuable for when they're not only just playing with Luka and Spencer Dinwiddie, but when they're playing with just one of them. So this is like the Maxi Kleber thing is low key huge for Christian Wood. As I said, this is not the best place you want to lean into Christian Wood, but I could see him playing a lot here. I think Dorian Finney-Smith, it was just a one-time thing. Mitchell was just straight cooking him. So I would expect Dorian Finney-Smith to get full minutes. I'm pretty sure that we'll see the starting lineup of Luka, Spencer Dinwiddie, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, and I think Dwight Powell with a short leash, but I won't be surprised if they go to Wood here just because missing Kleber could force a reshuffle.
The challenge with that is obviously it's just all of your offense is in that starting lineup. There's not any on the bench unit, and so you got to stagger really, really aggressively with. it's a whole substitution pattern change. So I think they'll probably start Powell and then like kind of work through what these iterations look like over time before we get to Wood. But yeah, we'll see on that
I think I'd say that's most likely for sure, but just something we'll be keeping an eye on.
Yeah. Doubtfuls or out tags. Clint Capella unlikely to play tonight or out, I should say.
Oh yeah.
For Atlanta. Onyeka Okongwu expected to start. He's been disappointing in his starts this year. He's had 3 starts this year. I think he's averaged like 4 points and 8 rebounds. Just been super, super disappointing. Has not played to the level that Capella has played in that starting lineup. What are your thoughts on how this impacts things for the Hawks?
Yeah, and it's rough because the minutes have been there. 3 starts at 32 minutes per game.
They've been against weaker opponents too. Like against Houston. It's been low key kind of a bad year for Okongwu.
Yeah, tough scene, but we love this spot, right? We love to play centers against the Charlotte Hornets. So I would expect to bounce back. I haven't looked at his price yet in DFS, but he's got to be a really, really good play here. And they're just, missing DeJounte and missing John Collins. They just have to allocate their resources for their 3s, 4s, and even 2s to fill those 2 through 4 minutes. So there's a chance his minutes could get really, really elevated if he avoids fouls and he has it going here. So he has a really, really high ceiling. Not having DeJounte, I think, definitely helps. Maybe could push more usage going his way there. So, we just love playing bigs against the Hornets. Like Jalen Duren was against the Hornets when he popped off. So I think Kong was a really good play today.
Yeah, one of the stranger things of that last game was seeing only 15 shot attempts for Trae Young. It's a weird mix. I'll note this just as somebody who's working on all the rate stuff. If you look at the samples of Trae without DeJounte and John Collins on the floor this season, he's had like a 40% usage in those samples. But in the last 3 games without these 2 guys, he's only had a 31% usage rate. So it seems like they've been funneling a lot more of the offense through Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, obviously Bogdan when he's on the floor. Oftentimes that's not with Trae. Do you think that continues to hold, or do you think we get back to seeing the Trae like monster usage in the spot against Charlotte tonight?
I think the usage should be really good. He's been just killing it. 21 drives since DeJounte went down. 21 drives per game, leading the NBA in potential assists. Massive. I think he's second in touch time. He has this A+ role in a matchup. But we just talked about how bad the Hornets on-ball defense is right now. He's in a big spot, so expect him to rebound after that. We had his overs, and he just shot like complete trash. He
didn't shoot the ball very much. That was the big problem.
Yeah.
15 shots. If you're taking over, we took over 30.5 points and rebounds. He gets 3 rebounds, so we're talking about over 28.5 points essentially. If are over 28 points, if you need over 28 points, 15 shots into 28 points is asking a lot. You need those shots in the 20s, and I think that's the interesting thing for me on Trae. The other thing I note is just historically, Trae and Okongwu do not have the same type of chemistry that Trae and Capella have, and you'll see it when watching the games a lot, where Trae will throw lobs that are dunks for Capella, and Okongwu is like catching them like on the way down and like trying to go back up with them. So it'll be really interesting to see if they can continue to work at that chemistry. It's been a little bit better when they've in this short stint without Murray and Collins. Okongwu's usage rate has climbed a little bit in the second unit, especially with Trae when they've been staggered in. So hopefully that holds tonight in a good match.
And do you want to know how do you? I was pretty confident they were going to start this way the last game. It's so different now. Now that you got, because you didn't have to really pressure 2 guys with the ball. You want the additional size. I think that they start the same, but I think there's a chance they go back to Forrest here. Got an eyelash in my eye.
Yeah, I think that could be the case, and that would be at the expense of Jalen Johnson. Is the expectation?
100%.
Yeah. I think that definitely could be the case. Obviously, wouldn't be super DFS relevant. Force with really low rates and a big slate, just totally unnecessary. Onto the probables and returns side of thing, Royce O'Neal is expected back for Brooklyn. No Patty Mills. What are your thoughts? The Brooklyn, we haven't seen them super healthy all season long, and now, they've reintegrated TJ Warren, they've reintegrated Seth Curry and Joe Harris. They get Simmons was out for a period of time. Kyrie was absent from the team for a period of time. They're starting to get their guys back now and have like a 9-man rotation that's Durant, Harris, Claxton, Kyrie, Simmons, Warren, Watanabe, Curry. And then they could extend it. They played 11 against Washington last time out, which was very surprising. and disappointing. I know I played a lot of Kevin Durant in DFS. His minutes came down. That's something that they've been talking about, but they haven't usually put that into action. What are your thoughts? Because Royce O'Neal, you see like last game, an 11-man rotation. Now you're adding Royce O'Neal, who's been playing mid-30s minutes back into the mix. Like, you can't play all the guys, so what's going to happen to the Brooklyn rotation tonight?
I think it gets back to mostly normal with Royce in there. And I think I mentioned this at some point. I forget when. I think that playing the Cam Thomas of the world, the Emmitt Sumners of the world, and even Morris to a lesser degree was because they played so well in Indiana. I didn't get any quotes. That's just kind of intuition. I think that they were okay. You guys played great. You won this game for us. Let's not put the other rotation here. So I think that's kind of why they went deeper. They've been off so they haven't played since Monday. So I'd expect them to be rested, big minutes as well. They kind of had this game for the most part. Wizards made a little bit of a run, but yeah, I think the rotation gets kind of back to normal here, and we don't see as many guys in there. Should note Kevin Durant, my matchup covers boy. He has been held in his tracks in the last 2 games against the Raptors, just 12 and 17 points, but big difference. No OG Anunoby. He has been just rolling 29 plus in every other game in his last 8 or 9 games, averaging I think 35 per game. So we are hammering Kevin Durant over ladders today.
And so you think this is going to be like a tighter 9-man rotation that settles in?
9 or 10, yeah, 9 or 10, yeah. I don't think we're going to see nearly as much Cam Thomas.
Be?
So we got the starters.
So I'm saying starters.
If we're assuming Seth is in, TJ Warren, Yuta, those would be the
and Royce O'Neal.
Sure. And then Royce O'Neal, yep. I'm counting Royce O'Neal as a starter, so Joe Harris as well.
So
that's
so
9.
Yeah.
I think it would be against the Raptors. Probably want a little more size there. I'd probably say Morris, but not confident.
Okay. Yeah, because if they go 10, like my big concern with some of these guys is I don't think it is super impactful for KD or Kyrie. I think those guys are going to play whatever they can play. Simmons has some sort of minutes cap that we don't really know what it is, so I think there's some limitation there. All the other guys, though, are very susceptible to the minutes range being wide. And sometimes you get guys like Royce that you want to play in DFS because he's small forward eligible and he has performed well this year. My concern is that, just coming back with all this depth, instead of seeing the 34, 35, 36, 37 that we had seen like all year long with Royce, what if it's now 30? And that's a big difference from a DFS perspective. You're probably not playing Royce at 30 minutes, but you might at 35, 36. And just because they have TJ Warren, they have Seth Curry, they have Joe Harris, they have all these different combinations of players, and KD is super interchangeable with how you use him in a lineup. That's my concern a little bit on Royce from a minutes perspective. It's very difficult to project because his minutes have been so consistently elevated all year long, but we haven't seen this much depth on the team to compete with them. So that's where I kind of wanted to ask more for you is do you think Royce is still 34 and above like pretty routinely, or do you think it's more variable with the added depth?
I mean, he's been out for a little bit, obviously personal issue, so it's not like he's returning from injury or illness. So I think he's not quite the same ceiling, but I'd probably put him at like low 30s if I'm doing minutes. I'm going to check after this.
Okay, cool. Let's talk Lakers probables. Anthony Davis, LeBron James probable. Any notes for the Lakers stuff?
No, not really. I just wanted to note, though, that Darvin Ham, let me pull up Popcorn Machine because the rotation was completely absurd, how he didn't take those guys out. If you're watching the game, you just saw – I know guys in our Discord are like, yo, let's just bet Boston live. The Lakers have no legs left, and that was super sharp. But there it is. Hold on one second. Just he just didn't sub anybody out. So, you just see – look at this. Like full fourth on Troy Brown – Austin Reeves, Westbrook, AD, and LeBron. These guys, 4 of them played the whole overtime, and they subbed in here 2 minutes. So you're talking 19-minute stints on 4 guys. I mean, that is just bananas. And he said, like, if the game's going a certain way, I'm just not going to sub anybody out. So that adds like a really nice ceiling to AD and LeBron. A better matchup for me for AD. I think Aaron Gordon could slow down LeBron a little bit. He hasn't been the same defensive player at all, though, so I'm still into LeBron. But I could see AD and Jokic kind of going off on each other tonight.
AD's been good against Jokic offensively, and I mean, you go back to the bubble days when AD was like, kind of carrying the team through the championship with his shooting. A lot of that was against Jokic as well. Enjoy it as long as it lasts. I just you can't play these guys this much and expect their bodies to hold up over the course of the season. Just it's going to come to an end at some point. All right. Other stuff that you had listed. Who starts for the Pacers tonight?
I think they stick with it. Obviously, why I noted it is the matchup. They're going against the big Cavs, and we've seen this Nesmith lineup be pretty good. So I think they start that way, but it could get sideways, and they could start Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith's kind of been a shell of himself, so I think they start small again. Carlisle seems to like it defensively.
Yeah, if they start small, would be pretty interested in Mobley there because the Cavs do seem to target when he has smaller opponents on him. And then Isaiah Livers still out for Detroit. Any notes you wanted to drop on the Detroit rotation? Killian Hayes has been playing a lot better of late. He was a big reason that they got that win in Charlotte. Any notes there you wanted to drop?
Yeah, he actually aggravated his shoulder. Update came out just as we were recording, so he's out for a long time. Isaiah Livers is, but yeah, they'll stick with that big starting lineup with Jalen Duren. Quotes from Casey Sand that they're going to be together for a long time. So really, no signs of anything changing with that starting lineup. Been a rough time for Jaden Ivey. Really struggling at scoring around the basket. His 3-point shot has disappeared. He's like, I think 25% since he returned from injury. So it's been tough. But yeah, Killian's been better. Interesting matchup. But Boyan actually could be a guy to look at today.
And then news just broke. Darius Bazley listed out with illness for Oklahoma City tonight. So you'd already mentioned that the matchup potentially against Gobert might require the size of Pokusevski, or the length, I should say, of Pokusevski. Well, no Darius Bazley now, so it's no Jeremiah Robinson Earl. The center options are starting to get pretty thin for Oklahoma City. Do we now see consistent Pokusevski minutes? How do they fill the center spot now?
I guarantee it's consistent. No, I think that it's way more likely, right? Like he's got two guys who have been in his way are Bazley and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. They're both out. So who's going to undo him this time? Eugene Omoyuri. As of right, let me check their injury report. But last time I checked, they didn't have their G League guys.
Yeah, but they update that usually. They usually update that like 2 hours before the game. So.
Yeah, and they're home, right? Yeah, they're home, so that could definitely change. But if they don't call up the G League guys, I mean, you gotta. I would
expect them to, if Gobert's available, I would expect Pokusevski to play a lot of minutes, largely against Gobert, and then Muscala the minutes against Naz Reid, because you need a bigger body against Naz Reid. He's bigger and he can go down on the post. He loves to shoot 3-pointers. But the Omoyuri, Poku, those guys, their size might be a challenge against Naz, who's just a really, really big human being.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where they were in Salt Lake City on Wednesday, and then I think they're still on the road. They don't play for a bit.
Yeah,
maybe they came back though.
Yeah, that's not a long trip. So
yeah, not at all. Yeah.
So we'll find out more on that term. Nutridad asking, ladders is a gambling term for taking his points at a higher line for more value. Please help me understand.
Yeah, basically I don't know what. So just an example I'll use with Zion. Zion was lined at 28.5. So if you're taking a ladder on him, you're taking either 30, 40, or 45 even. So you get the minus 115 or whatever for the 28.5. But if you take him at plus 35 or 35 plus, I think it was like plus 280. So you're getting the further away you are from the line, obviously, is
the idea is you would put if you're deciding to put like, let's say 3 units on Zion in total, right? Because you're like really excited about Zion tonight or whatever. Zion's not playing tonight, but the example, you would put like a unit, maybe a unit and a quarter on the main line, the 28.5. Then you'd put a lesser piece of the unit, a percentage, like half a unit on the 35-point line, and then maybe a quarter of a unit on the 40-point line. And thus the idea is that as you go up the ladder, you're getting paid out more and more and more is the idea. If you don't hit the full ladder, obviously if you cash the first part of the ladder and you have more on that than the other parts, you still make money on the bet overall. But the further you get up the ladder, the more the dollars add up. Sort of the idea. Okay. With that, we've covered all of the injury information. We have plenty of work to do on our own to continue to find props to fire out. As a reminder, support the people who support us on this program. This show is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have daily NBA snake drafts for money running in addition to many formats of NFL contests, still running for huge cash prizes, including some of these playoff contests that I've been talking about that I think are really fun. We were on our holiday party last night. We had some guys drafting them against each other and talking through strategy and just in going through it. And it's a really fun, interesting contest. I honestly wish I had more time this time of the year to enter it. But you can check that out over there. If you're playing NBA Pick'em, in-season subscribers to our DFS package can use our tool to compare ETR projections to their fantasy Pick'em games. And if you haven't signed up for Underdog yet, please use promo code ETR at sign up for a matching deposit bonus up to $100. That's promo code ETR at underdogfantasy.com. Okay. As always, myself and today, Gary Hartman will be behind the paywall at 5 o'clock Eastern, talking through this 10-game slate from the DFS perspective. If you are a premium member, we will see you there. If you are not, check us on out over at the Established Run. Check out the subscribe page. We've got everything that you need on the DFS or prop side. If you're uninterested in giving us your hard-earned dollars, we ask for you to consider giving us your hard-earned clicks. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel, get notifications whenever we go live. You can also smash that like button and continue to circulate our content within the algorithm. Feed the algorithm. Help us feed our families. Feed yourselves this weekend with DFS and props. Nom, 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 nom. Have a good weekend, everybody.